Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a journey right into the core of what makes us human, our emotions. We're going to demystify the mind, looking at the hard science behind why we feel what we feel and how mastering those feelings can completely transform our daily lives. So, let's get started.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're covering the science of emotion, mapping our feelings, why emotional intelligence matters, navigating sensitive conversations, and finally, building your EQ.
Section 1. The Science of Emotion, Understanding Our Internal Wiring.
So, we toss around words like emotion, feeling, and mood all the time, right? Kind of like they mean the exact same thing, but scientifically, they're actually very different. Based on research from the University of West Alabama, an emotion is a complex, immediate physical and behavioral reaction to a stimulus. It's a very intense, bodily response. A feeling, on the other hand, well, that's the conscious result of that emotion. It's what happens when your brain finally registers that physical reaction. And a mood? That's a short-lived, low-intensity state that often doesn't even have a clear starting point or specific trigger. Understanding this distinction is really the very first step in gaining control over our reactions. Now, psychologists take this a step further and divide our emotional landscape into two categories: basic and complex emotions. Basic emotions, like joy, sadness, fear, or disgust, are innate and universal. Actually, it was Charles Darwin who theorized this, noting that these basic emotions have universally recognizable facial expressions that are essential for human survival. But complex emotions, they are fascinating. They're basically just recipes made from basic emotions, and they vary wildly across cultures. For example, did you know the emotion of hate is actually just an aggregate of fear, anger, and disgust? Recognizing these basic ingredients is a total superpower for self-awareness. It's honestly wild how our understanding of all this has evolved. Back in the 19th century, scientists thought a pounding heart literally caused fear. By the 1920s, the thinking shifted to believe the physical arousal and the emotion happened simultaneously. But today, cognitive appraisal theory flips the whole script. It suggests your brain actually thinks and appraises a situation before the emotion even kicks in. You experience a stimulus, your brain appraises it, and then you experience the physical response and the emotion. Your cognitive interpretation holds the key. Section 2. Mapping our feelings, visualizing the abstract.
Now, what's really interesting here is Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. Created by psychologist Robert Plutchik, this wheel acts as a literal visual compass to help us navigate incredibly complex emotional states, showing exactly how they relate, contrast, and build on one another.
Let's break down exactly how this works. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. At its core, it features 8 primary emotions, structured as polar opposites, like joy versus sadness or trust versus disgust. But pay close attention to the intensity. The vertical dimension of the wheel represents that intensity. The darker the shade, the more intense the emotion. This illustrates an absolutely crucial rule. If left unchecked, emotions intensify. A simple feeling of annoyance can move right to the center of the wheel and build into absolute rage. Furthermore, it shows us combinations. When you blend anticipation and joy, you get optimism. Mix joy and trust, and you get love. This gives us a really precise vocabulary to label exactly what we are feeling. And as we map these feelings out, we have to remember a core adaptive theory. All emotions serve an evolutionary purpose. There are truly no good or bad emotions. While sure, we might prefer feeling joy over fear, fear is what keeps us safe from threats. Anger provides the energy needed to overcome obstacles. Even the heavy, uncomfortable feelings have tremendous value for our survival, focus, and human connection. Section 3. Why emotional intelligence matters. The data behind the feelings. To put all this into perspective, the stakes right now are incredibly high. Data from the NHS indicates that 1 in 5 children in England aged 8 to 16 has a probable mental health difficulty. Our youth are struggling to navigate a complex, highly stimulating world, and they often just lack the emotional vocabulary and regulation skills to process their internal experiences. But there is a profoundly hopeful counter-statistic here. Research from CASEL, that's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, shows that when children are taught social and emotional learning programs, they see an 11 percentile point increase in academic performance. Teaching kids to map and manage their emotions doesn't just make them feel better, it actually clears their cognitive pathways to learn, focus, and succeed. And this absolutely applies to adults just as much as children. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, isn't just about feeling deeply. It's a highly structured skill set. It essentially breaks down into 3 core pillars: appraising emotions in yourself and others, regulating them toward a positive outcome,
and using them adaptively to actually solve problems. It's a highly dynamic and proactive skill set.
To really underscore this, check out this claim from psychologist Daniel Goleman. He argues EQ counts twice as much as IQ and technical skills combined when it comes to being successful. Think about that for a second. Double. Whether you're leading a boardroom or managing a household, your ability to regulate emotion is your ultimate competitive advantage.
Section 4. Navigating sensitive conversations. Putting EQ to work.
So, the crucial point here is that high EQ isn't passive. It requires real preparation. The University of Nebraska provides some fantastic guidance for facilitating sensitive topics. The steps are pretty clear. First, prepare yourself and reflect on your own biases before you even enter the room. Second, establish clear ground rules with everyone involved. Third, create a structured framework for the discussion so it doesn't just run off the rails. And fourth, always summarize the key takeaways and move to action.
Step 2, the ground rules, is where emotional regulation really gets put to the test. When you are about to discuss something sensitive, laying these rules out is vital. You must ask participants to assume positive intent. You have to commit to learning, not debating just to win. Always address the issues on the table, not the people in the room. And perhaps most importantly, avoid speculation, blame, and inflammatory language. These rules act as guardrails against that intense emotional escalation we saw earlier on Plutchik's wheel.
If you're the one leading the conversation, remember this somewhat counterintuitive truth. Your job isn't to dominate, persuade, or even share your own opinion. Your job is simply to listen and manage the emotional temperature of the room. Empathy and collective intelligence should guide the outcome.
Section 5. Building your EQ, your personal action plan.
And this brilliantly illustrates how seriously institutions are catching on to this. For example, the University of Wollongong in Australia offers a course specifically on emotional intelligence for leaders. Notice they don't treat EQ as a soft skill. It's a rigorous academic pursuit where leaders actively evaluate their emotional strengths and weaknesses. Part of the coursework for those leaders is a really practical exercise, and I'm going to pass this challenge right on to you as a little bit of homework. The instruction is to record your emotional responses 4 times per day for a period of 5 days. Set a calendar reminder on your phone. When it goes off, use a tool like the feelings wheel to identify exactly what you are experiencing. By actively tracking your feelings, you move them from the unconscious physical realm into the conscious cognitive realm. You begin to build real self-awareness. As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. How will your brand new emotional vocabulary change your next difficult conversation? When you can definitively say, I am feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety, instead of just lashing out an annoyance, you change the dynamic of your entire life. Understanding your own mind is the very first step to mastering it. Thank you so much for joining me, and I strongly encourage you to take that first step today.